Hi, third graders. We're going to look at another story called Voting for Her Rights when we are describing characters today. This will be on pages 94 and 95 in your Ready Common Core book. And let's get started. During our class meeting on Monday, I read a story to you called Badgers Bring Something Party. In that story, we describe the character Mole using character traits. At the beginning of the story, we use the words grumpy, selfish, unhappy. Those were words that described Mole. However, we also noticed that there was a change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story in Mole. And by the end of the story, we were noticing that he was funny, happy, helpful, and the other characters in the story wanted to be around him. So we were also able to determine the event that happened in the story where we started to first notice those changes in Mole. So understanding the characters in the story really help us understand what is going on in the story. And that brings us to today's learning target. I can describe characters in a story. For example, using the traits or the motivations, that means why they are doing what they're doing, or their feelings. And then we're going to explain how their actions create or change the events in a story. Today we're going to read a story called Voting for Her Rights. This is a historical fiction story. What that means is the time period that this story is taking place is real. This person that we're going to read about is also real. However, the story itself is based on actual events, but this story is fiction. So the person in the story, which we're going to be reading about, her name is Susan B. Anthony. She was a real person, and what she did in the story is real. However, the situation is made up, so that's what makes the story fiction. So we're going to read this story on page 94 in your Ready Common Core book, and we're going to do a close reading. So we're going to read first to find out what the story is about. We're going to do another read to look for details in the story that describe our character, which is Susan B. Anthony. And then you're going to use the information from the text to fill in the chart on page 95. All right, I want you to open up your Ready Common Core book if it's not already open, and I want you to pause the video while you read the story. Then we're going to read it together, and we're going to look for some of the information that's on page 95. The traits that you would learn, that you would use to describe Susan B. Anthony. Remember, those are character traits. You could describe somebody as helpful or friendly or unfriendly or lazy or determined or successful or hardworking. So those are words that would describe characters. Those are traits. Then we're going to look for details in the text that describe the motivation of the character. Remember, a motivation is what makes somebody do something, the reasons why they're doing something. And then we're going to look for feelings that Susan B. Anthony might be feeling while all of this is going on. And then the actions, those are the things that she actually does. So we're going to look for evidence in the text. So again, pause the video, read the story, and then we're going to read together to look for the evidence for the chart. Okay, so hopefully you read the story. Now I'm going to go ahead and read it with you. So since this is our second read, since you already read it once by yourself, this time we're going to be looking for evidence for the traits, motivations, feelings, and actions. Okay, follow along as I read to you. Susan B. Anthony was about to do something dangerous. She stood before a group of women listening to her speak. "We must vote," she told them. "We must all vote." The crowded room filled with noise as some women cheered and others began to argue. "We could be arrested," one woman cried. It was true, because in 1872 only men had the right to vote. Susan said, "We likely will be arrested and put on trial, But don't you see, we have to do it. How else will we show how much we want our voting rights? Susan marched off the stage and led the women outside. Together they went to a polling place where men were voting for president. An election worker stopped Susan. "Madame," he said, "I can't let you vote." "But you must," Susan replied. "The law says that all persons born in this country are citizens, and citizens are allowed to vote." The worker looked at the group of determined women and sighed. "Very well," he said. Susan's friends let out a cheer. Susan entered the voting booth and cast her vote. So did 15 other women, including 3 of Susan's sisters. 2 weeks later, Susan and the others were all arrested for voting, but Susan wasn't about to give up her fight for women's rights. Okay, so now that we've read that twice, you read it once and I read it with you, your job is going to be to look back through this text for those traits that you would use to describe Susan B. Anthony. And then the motivations. Why did she do what she did? Why did she go ahead and vote when she knew she could be arrested? What was her motivation? Then feeling. How do you think she's feeling while all of this is happening? And then finally, the actions. What actions did she take in the story? What did she do? Then the next part you're going to do is use that information to fill out a short response. And at the bottom of page 95, it says, explain why Susan B. Anthony casts a vote even though she expects to be arrested. Use details from the text in your answer. So you're going to fill this out in Schoology. You're going to write what traits you see about Susan B. Anthony, or that you would use to describe her. What were her motivations for doing what she did? How was she feeling? And what were the actions she actually did? Actions did she take? And then you're going to write the short response in Schoology. So boys and girls, let's wrap this. Today we described character traits about Susan B. Anthony. Remember, character traits are special qualities about a character in the story. The way that the characters behave or act or respond to different events in the story depend on their traits. If they're an angry person, they're going to do things that are angry. If they're helpful or kind, then they're going to be doing things that are a little bit nicer. And the way that characters act in the story guide the events in the story. And the last one, it is important for us to understand characters to help us understand what we're reading about. Okay, boys and girls, go ahead and go into Schoology and put in the information about Susan B. Anthony in your assignment. Good job.